Be bold. Be brave. Be extraordinary. Be vulnerable. Be real. Be curious. Be true. Be you. Welcome to Trusting Your Gut with world-class energy intuitive Katherine McIntosh, a show designed to awaken you to enjoy the process of evolving, have fun along the way, and learn to listen to those silent in-between moments. You are the expert of your own life, and nobody knows more about the next steps to take in your journey than you. So please, listen to your gut and discover what's waiting for you to explore. Here is your host, Katherine McIntosh.
All right, so welcome to today's show. I am always excited for the topics that we explore together. And I'm so thankful to all of you who continue to listen to this show, who call in, who message in, who let us know like, hey, that topic really resonated with me. So today's topic, I think, is going to be a good one for most of you. And it's your symptoms are a window into, right? Something. Your symptoms are not the problem. And so often we go to the doctor for a headache or a knee ache or a belly ache, and we're given a pill or a diagnosis. And then we go take that thing. But what happens is we never really bother to ask, why the symptoms there in the first place? Where did it come from? And symptoms are simply the body's way of letting you know that something's off. And so if you have been dealing with anything in your body, the first thing, and you might have had an accident, a car accident or a bike accident, and you jammed your neck really good, or you threw your lower back out, or you knocked your hips around. The first question that I look at is we tend to go, oh, it's the accident. And I'm like, no, the accident happened because we weren't totally listening. Accidents usually wake us up. And that might be a hard topic or a hard conversation to hear. But the truth is that I believe that we can heal anything that's occurring if we're willing to listen, to get underneath the symptom. And so the symptom is the doorway in. And the doorway in might be a plethora of different things. So let me give you an example. Years ago, and I think I've given this example before, I was in a very unhappy marriage and I had gotten very sick, and no amount of doctors and tests and blood draws and urine samples could figure out what was wrong with me. And, no one had bothered to ask me, well, what's going on in your life? They asked the symptoms, and then they handed me a prescription, or they handed me a diagnosis. And I probably was diagnosed 6 or 7 times, and no prescription, no method to heal the diagnosis actually worked. And so I went to this healer. I had never been to a healer before. And this woman said, like, hey, I'm just going to put my hands on your body and ask you questions. So I went in, and I was fully clothed on a massage table. She put one hand on my sacrum and one hand on my belly. And she's like, what does your body know? What's your belly trying to communicate? And it was like, oh my gosh, I don't feel safe. I don't trust the relationship that I'm in. And so all of these things unfolded in that 1-hour session. And I had been struggling for over 9 months with a lot of symptoms. Fatigue. I'd lost over 40 pounds in just a couple months. I had massive stomach pain. I couldn't digest my food. I was lethargic. I was like irritable. There are all these things that were happening. And of course, my first sort of knee-jerk reaction was to go to the doctor. But what I realized in that experiment and in that experience is that the doctor was guessing just as much as I was. And so when we have pain in our bodies, we tend to have a blind spot. And that blind spot, usually underneath the blind spot, is the answer to at least the doorway into a possible solution. And so after that 1-hour session, I basically walked away knowing that I was in a really bad marriage, that I wasn't happy, and that I had to leave. And when I admitted that to myself in the session, about, I think it was like 50% of my symptoms went away. Now, to me, that was a giant miracle. I was young, I was in my 20s, and I was like, wait, a doctor couldn't figure out what was wrong. In fact, several doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong. But here was this woman that was asking me what my body knew. And in that process, 50% of my symptoms went away in 1 hour. There was no medication given. There was no, here's your prognosis, here's your diagnosis, here's your description. It was more like I uncovered this silent truth that was living in my body. And the truth was, I was in a very toxic, very abusive relationship, and it was not the direction that I was meant to go in. And so the minute I acknowledged that I shouldn't be in this relationship, my symptoms disappeared, at least the majority of them. And then they continued to disappear over time as I opened the door to the fact that it, my body was only breaking down because I was ignoring the fact that I was miserable. I was pretending to have this great life, to make tons of money, traveling around the world, married with apparently an amazing husband. And, I remember when I left that relationship, I said to people, you never know what happens behind closed doors. Because behind that closed door was a lot of violence, a lot of abuse, a lot of verbal just cutting. And my spirit had started to break. And in my spirit breaking, my body followed suit. And as my body began to break down, a doctor's prognosis was not the answer to solving this issue. What was the window into solving this issue was going underneath the symptom. So today we're going to talk about some things that may be happening in your life and some possible solutions or some questions that you can ask to begin to open the doorway to what's actually going on in your life. And I do have it with me. So one of my favorite books that I've kind of kept in my arsenal when I work on people is this Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. And I've probably had this book for 20 years, although you can't tell, I've used it a lot. And it's great because in here it will tell you, right, like, okay, if you have sprains, right, what's the probable cause? And I don't use this as if this is speaking to me the truth. I use it as a guidebook to see if there's some resonance with the prognosis. And so if I just open the book and it says sprains probable cause is anger and resistance, not wanting to move in a certain direction in life, right? And I'll give another story. So a few years ago, I was also in a bad relationship. If you're noticing my pattern, it's called not so great relationships. And really what happens, at least for me, and I've changed this pattern since, but what used to happen for me is I would choose people that had potential, that I could see their gifts. But what I would do in the process as an intuitive, as someone who's sensitive, as a healer, is I would ignore all of the stuff that was actually occurring in the moment. So maybe they were an alcoholic. My dad loved his booze and was on and off around, on and off present in my life. And so that was comfortable. That was familiar. And so I chose men who had a similar vibration or resonance to my dad, which means most of them were addicts of some sort. And in that process, I was like, oh, well, if we love each other enough, we'll get through it. Oh, well, if I'm just patient enough, it will resolve itself. Oh, if I wait long enough and just continue to show up with love and gratitude, it will eventually shift. But what wasn't happening is that I wasn't looking at what was occurring in the now. And so every time something would happen in the now that was disagreeable to the relationship, I would make excuses as to why that person was choosing that. Oh, they had a really hard childhood. Oh, they, lost their job. Oh, they don't speak English, right? Which is true. My first husband didn't speak English. And and if you've listened to previous episodes, you'll hear my story of getting thrown overboard, cheated on, and getting thrown overboard on my honeymoon in the Galapagos Islands. And so it wasn't that I couldn't make the relationship work, it was that I was choosing the wrong people to be in relationship with. And so when our bodies break down, it's because we're trying to force something to work that's no longer working. So your job may no longer be working for you and you're forcing it. Something about your relationship might not be working and you haven't had sort of the guts or the resources or the confidence or the courage to address the situation that you keep finding yourself in this relationship. And so the body breaks down, right? And I'm going to kind of share some things that I've noticed with bodies, working with bodies for over 20 years from people all over the world, whether it's in person or long distance sessions. And I've discovered a whole bunch of things. And one of the things recently I discovered is about the thyroid. And when people deal with thyroid issues, it's sometimes your inability to use your voice. You don't feel confident speaking your truth. You're afraid of the consequences if you stand up for yourself or if you set boundaries or if you say yes or no to something. But what I've really found that was really curious is a lot of women that deal with thyroid issues are dealing with weight issues, and underneath the thyroid and the weight issue is this giant sense of insecurity, of not feeling like they're enough. And I've come across a lot of people with eating disorder issues. So whether you are obsessed with what you're eating, when you're eating, how much you're eating, what you shouldn't be eating, but you can't control your eating. I mean, all gamuts of eating disorder issues. There tends to be this insecurity, this deep insecurity that who they are aren't enough. And there also tends to be this deep feeling that they don't even know is possibly running their entire lives, that they don't feel safe. And a lot of people with weight issues, weight is usually associated with, covering up something. So it might be covering up an abuse from a childhood, might be covering up insecurities, might be covering up, a rape or something like that. But at underneath the surface of weight issues are usually two things. And it's this feeling of not feeling safe. And so when you don't feel safe, your body mobilizes all of its resources for survival. And when your body is in survival, your digestion starts to shut down, your nervous system starts to shut down, your digestion starts to shut down, and all of these different things. And so you go on a diet thinking that a diet will solve the problem. But what I've discovered in my 20 years of research is that a diet doesn't solve the problem. And I'm sure most of you listening can resonate with that. It's this idea that you have to uncover where it is that you don't feel safe. What happened in your childhood that created this giant sense of not feeling safe? And the other thing is this giant feeling of never feeling good enough, never feeling like you're enough. So A lot of people who deal with weight issues, they're like, I've tried everything. They don't love the skin they're in. They think a diet will fix it. They're constantly judging the size of their thighs or their weight or their size. They're constantly saying, well, if I could just lose 5 pounds, if I could just lose 20 pounds, then I'll be happy. And really, what's happening underneath the surface is this deep insecurity. And so we use extra weight on our bodies to reject ourselves because we're already rejecting us. And so we use the weight so that we make the excuse that, oh, that person's rejecting me, when really you're rejecting you. And there is just this massive, like, roller coaster that happens. And so it isn't until you address why you feel the way you do about you. Where is it? What happened in your life that you felt unsafe? And when you begin to do that, then your nervous system can heal and mobilize. Your digestion can improve. Your good gut microbiome in your intestines starts to improve, right? You start to then trust your intuition. You start to listen and pay attention to what works. And you can start asking questions like, what foods make me feel sexy? What foods make me feel safe? Not comfort food, right? But what foods make me feel safe in my body? Comfort foods might make you feel safe, but most people who eat comfort food all the time, they're trying to run away from something. They don't feel safe. So, food is how they learned to make themselves feel safe, but then they don't feel safe in their own bodies. It's kind of crazy, right? And so you might be listening to this going, great, well, how do I get underneath the symptom? You want to start to dig deeper and ask questions. So let me share a few more symptoms, probable causes of that, right? Like anxiety. And nowadays, anxiety is a buzzword. Oh, I have anxiety. Great. Here's some Xanax. Oh, I have anxiety. Here's some, I have depression. Here's some Zoloft. So, anxiety is usually suppressed awareness. You are aware of something that you keep suppressing. You don't want to know you're aware of it. So, a great example, I started when I was in this bad marriage, I started having panic attacks. And actually, in my second marriage, when my marriage was falling apart, I started having panic attacks. And what I didn't want to admit to myself was that the relationship was over, was that it was no longer safe for me to stay in this dynamic and that I needed to leave. And in the convincing myself to stay, to try to work it out, to try to make it okay, I started having massive anxiety. Now, at the time, this is 20 plus years ago, I Xanax was, I don't know if it was even around. You didn't go to the doctor for anxiety medication, at least in my world, right? And so depression is also suppressing your gifts. You're suppressing your intuition. You're suppressing who you are. And so all of a sudden, over time, you suppress yourself for long enough, it starts to develop as something doctors would diagnose as depression. But what depression really is you not living your best life, is you not living out your dreams. And so when you're depressed, you can ask, what are you suppressing? What dreams have you given up on? Right? What quality of living have you given up on? Where are you feeling like you're a victim in your life? And so the deeper you're willing to go into this, the more you can heal it with total ease. And healing doesn't have to be traumatic. A lot of people have these traumatic experiences of going to healers, and I hear their stories and I'm like, I can't believe that that exists. Right. And I'm sure that at some point in my 20 years of working with people, I probably have triggered them. I've probably re energized the abuse, not intentionally. And I work hard every day to try to be a space where people feel safe to sort of explore the things that they're ashamed of, that they're hiding, and that they don't even know might be there. And so, like if you have ankle or feet problems, it might be that you have a hard time standing up for yourself. So you can ask the question, where am I, or what am I having a hard time standing up for myself? Right? What is it I can't stand? Right? Where do I not feel supported? Right? Because ankles are a form of support. Feet are a form of support. Okay. When your knees break down or you have a knee accident, you can ask, where in your life are you not moving forward? Or the other question is, what needs do you have that you're ignoring? What needs do you have that you are making wrong? What needs do you have that you're trying to make right? So there's all different ways to explore this. And, we'll get more into how you keep digging deeper. But let's keep talking about these body issues, right? Or things where your body starts break down. So, if you have hip problems, it might be that you have stopped being flexible. Hips, right, are also where you can store anger. So, I remember when I was going through my first divorce with my husband, and I was like, he's the love of my life. This is it. I was 23 years old. I was not loving myself, and this person happened to be exactly like my dad. And so, I was probably trying to heal, unresolved wounds that I had, but I wasn't doing it consciously. I was doing it unconsciously. Right. And so sometimes in our hips, I was in this class and I was doing pigeon, and you can look it up. Pigeon is a yoga, like a yoga pose, and I'm in pigeon, and all of a sudden I just start crying uncontrollably, like sobbing, almost embarrassed. I was brand new to yoga. I didn't really know anything about it, and I am like breaking down massively in this class, like breaking down massively. And the teacher came up to me and was like, wow, you must be letting go of something really deep. And I was like, I didn't even know it was in there. And after that huge release, my hips were more flexible, right? I had more mobility. I was healing the stuff that my body had been going through by suppressing the fact that I needed to leave that relationship. And so also in your hips is when you're not flexible, when you're storing trauma, right? You could be storing sexual trauma, you could be storing shame. And so you never know what's in a body part. And so one of the things that you can do is, let's say you're having trouble with your shoulder, right? And you can basically put your hand on your shoulder and you can ask like what your shoulder's trying to communicate, right? What are you mad at? What are you angry at? What needs to heal? And notice as I ask those questions, I'm yawning. Why? Because this is the shoulder I injured a few months ago, right? And someone said shoulders can also represent shouldering the financial burden. And, I've been a single mom for a long time. I've been a business owner for a long time. I'm usually the one supporting others. And so I could feel the burden financially of what was going on in my life at the time. Right? And so it's like, wow, okay, so what is in there? What would you like to communicate? So if you're having troubles with your belly, you can put your hands on your belly. And I believe we did a version of this last week in the episode. And so you kind of can close your eyes, put your hands on your belly and be like, what would you like to communicate? And you just listen. Now, if you start yawning, that's your answer. You're releasing energy. You don't Excuse me. See, releasing energy. You don't need to know what you're releasing, although sometimes you might know. You just need to be willing to release, right? Like consciousness is ever evolving, and it is one of the most beautiful things on this planet. This ability to constantly shift and evolve, this ability to take in everything, this ability to know that everything's happening. And so when we look at a molecule with our eyes, the molecule changes. When you ask a question, you can put your hand on a body part and ask, "What would you like to communicate?" And, when I say that to my shoulder, it's like nothing comes out that is cognitive or that I'm conscious of, but I keep wanting to yawn. I can feel an energy, right? And it's like, great, I just looked at a molecule, the molecule changed. Now I'm going to ask again, what else would you like to communicate? And I can feel some energy moving in this part of my body. It makes me want to yawn. I get a little sleepy. And so being able to get underneath the symptom, right? The symptom is simply the window into what is wrong, what needs to be fixed or changed, what needs to be resolved. And then you keep going deeper. And so, great questions to ask yourselves are like, what am I ignoring? What is my body trying to communicate? When your lower back hurts, it could be because you're hiding something. Could be because you're afraid of something. It could be because you're scared to take a risk or take the next step, right? It could also be that you're trying to hide your gifts, your capacities, your talents, right? Your like energetic power. You could be trying to hide that. And so anger also is either when somebody is lying to you and you don't want to know they're lying to you, you'll get angry, right? Ever get into a fight where you know the truth and this person keeps lying to you, and the more they lie to you, the angrier you get. It's because anger is a form of letting you know that you're aware of a lie. Another thing that anger can be is that anger can be suppressed awareness, right? Suppressed potency, suppressed power, suppressing your gifts, right? And a lot of people right now have been suppressing their gifts. They think they need to be farther along. So, like, I went to grad school to study somatic psychology because I was obsessed after my failed first marriage. I was obsessed with this mind body connection. How the heck could 50% of my symptoms disappear by a woman putting her hands on my body very gently, fully clothed, and just asking me what I was aware of, what my body knew. And I was like, I want to study this. I want to dive into this. And so I went to grad school because I thought that I needed a degree to do what I do. Well, it wasn't until after my first year of grad school where I left the first year feeling depressed. I'd gained 15 pounds. I was suppressing my gifts because I was trying to learn their form, their method. And I learned a lot. And I'm so grateful for that experience. But what I realized is I was going to grad school because I thought I needed a degree. So I was going for the wrong reasons. Right. And I did learn a lot, but also through my first year, I learned that I wasn't on the right path. And whenever my body breaks down, so if I gain weight, if I'm fatigued or tired, if I start to have unexplainable body pains, that is my body breaking down to let me know I am not on my right life path, that it's time for a shift in that path. And a lot of intuitive and sensitive people, they try to focus on one thing. They're like, oh, if I could just focus on my career, if I could just focus on my relationship. But intuitive people tend to do best when they allow themselves to be focusing on 10 to 15 to 20 things at a time. And so instead of focusing on career or focusing on relationships, if you focus on including everything in your life that makes you happy, including everything in your life that expands your horizons, you will wake up with a different possibility and your symptoms will begin to change. Yeah. So there's a lot more to this conversation. We will continue after we take this break. We'll be right back.
OMTimes TV.
Do you trust you? Do you trust your body? What if the key to unlocking the weight, pain, suffering, fear, anxiety, addictions, traumas, and sorrows was already inside of you? Learn to love the skin you are in so you can create the body, business, and life you love. Everyone always says you can't explain what Katherine does, you just have to experience it. From Hollywood actors to New York Times best-selling authors to some of the world's wealthiest and most successful, no two experiences are the same. For private sessions, online courses, live events, and the latest book Jack Canfield calls Game Changer and should be required reading for everyone, go to KatherineMcIntosh.com. KatherineMcIntosh.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
I want to eat apples and bananas. I need to eat apples and bananas. Why can't I eat apples and bananas?
Support the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks to help provide meals to those in need. Join us at feedingamerica.org.
All right, so welcome back from the break. We are talking about symptoms and what your symptoms may actually be. So symptoms simply are a window into what's wrong, but the symptom itself is not the problem. The problem is usually underneath the symptom. And so I know so many people that have gone to the doctor with a symptom and they've come out misdiagnosed. And then they spend their life going, oh, well, I've been diagnosed with this. And guess what? It's like a placebo effect, not necessarily a good placebo effect, but a placebo effect. So if you think that you have a thyroid problem, you're constantly using that saying, I have a thyroid problem. I have a thyroid problem, or I have irritable bowel syndrome, or I have, adrenal fatigue, or I have an autoimmune disease. And yes, though your symptoms might be presenting as an autoimmune disease or MS or chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue or thyroid, it may be expressing as that, but to label it as that prevents you from healing it. Because all of a sudden, what you've done is you are reinforcing that your body has this particular problem. And the more you say, oh, I have this particular problem, like I watch women who say, oh, I'm overweight. Oh, I'm overweight. Oh, I'm overweight. Well, guess what? Your body is 60 to 76% water. So the water in your body is taking on your verbal and nonverbal messaging. So if you think I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough, I can't be successful, I'm a failure, and you keep reinforcing that, guess what? Your body starts to take that on as truth, and it will create whatever you tell it. So if you start telling your body, you're amazing, you're incredible, I'm so grateful for you, thank you for being in my life, thank you for your strong legs, thank you for your strength, thank you for your resilience, right? Thank you for digesting your food properly, thank you for feeling safe, and you start to shift the messages you tell yourself. Right? You start telling yourself you're brave. You start telling yourself you're bold, you're courageous, you're inspirational. Well, guess what? The body's going to start to create a different energy around that that allows for the dis-ease in your body to heal. And so our bodies, when they're fully at their maximum capacity, vibrating and elevating and just creating a smooth, like your energy's just going. Most of the cells in our body in that time are mostly spherical. So, like a perfectly round circle. Now, when dis-ease comes in, it comes in because the cells have been squashed. And how do cells get squashed? By the negative messages we tell ourselves. Right? And so all of a sudden, half the cells in our body are squashed because we've told ourselves these negative messages over and over and over and over again. The body begins to create it as truth. And so if you're diagnosed with autoimmune, if you're diagnosed with chronic fatigue, stop telling yourself that that's your diagnosis if you want to change it. If you're interested in truly healing, the question to ask is, what am I tired of? What's my body tired of? What's my being tired of? What am I trying to force? What am I sick and tired of? How many lifetimes have I been carrying around something that wears me down, that fatigues me, that depletes my energy? So what's depleting? Hey, body, what's depleting our energy? And you might be surprised that a lot of bodies will start to say, your thoughts are depleting our energy. And, we know the power of mindset. We know the power of our thoughts. And yet, when our bodies break down, we tend to contract our energy. And when our energy is contracted, our cells in our body tend to collapse. So they tend to get squashed, which makes us more prone to getting sick, makes us more prone to dis-ease or weight gain or thyroid issues or adrenal fatigue. Right. And so you just want to ask, like, look at the place in your body that is breaking down, put your hands on it, or have someone else put their hands on it, or just become energetically aware of that. And as long as this person is not judging you, is willing to be total space and presence for you, is willing to show up with no point of view, no discernment, no like right or wrong. And they're just there to support you. And you can go, okay, what is my belly trying to communicate to me? Right? What is my neck trying to communicate to me? When our necks go out, it's usually because there's someone or something that is a pain in our neck. Right? When your butt hurts, could be someone or something is a pain in your butt. Right? And the other thing that, I've noticed a pattern with is men who go through cancer, either in their I'm going to say anus, right? Either in their anus or in their like pelvic floor. And usually the men that are doing that, they're in a marriage or they're in a job or they're in a situation where they've given up and they don't feel like they have control. And they also feel like they've lost their masculinity. And so, you can ask, where did I give myself away? And I apologize for any background noise. There's a huge dump truck outside my window. But there's this idea that, let me treat the cancer with chemo. Now, that's not a bad thing to do, but the real testament to getting yourself free is to see why that symptom came up in the first place. Where did you give away your masculinity? Where, for women, it's breast cancer and they stop nurturing themselves. And so where did I stop nurturing myself? What points of views do I have about nurturing myself? And again, I greatly apologize for the noise. Hopefully it's not as loud to you as it is to me. And so there's all these things like bladder problems could be that you're really mad at someone, right? Anger covers up sadness. And, these aren't set in stone, but then the question is, you might be sitting here listening and being like, wow, I've had this diagnosis for 10 years and it's never changed. So this is just my point of view and my perspective on this is that if you've been given a diagnosis and you've tried healing the diagnosis you were given and it hasn't shifted at all, then it's not the right diagnosis. However, it might be the right body part. So if your kidneys are taxed or fatigued, you can put your hands on your kidneys and ask, what are you trying to communicate? And so, I wrote the book, Don't Diet, Be Happy, kind of all about body awareness, body intuition, but why we should stop trying to diet and instead start getting underneath the surface and see where we can feel safe, how we can heal where we don't feel safe, how we can develop a relationship with our bodies that isn't this sort of like slave owner dynamic, because a lot of us are trying to be slave owners to our bodies, and our body is our slave. So we're like, do this, do that, sleep this many hours, don't sleep, sacrifice this, do this. And then we wonder why the body breaks down, because we're not in a co-creative relationship with it. Think about if you were in a relationship in your life with anyone else, and they were your slave owner. So you were their slave and they demanded you to do this, do that, don't go there, don't do this, don't do this. Chances are you'd be like, I don't feel safe and this is not a happy relationship. I'm out. I'm out. Right? So your symptoms are simply this invitation for you to develop a relationship with your body, because when your body gets angry, it's frustrated, it's in pain, it's trying to get your attention. And when you ignore it more and more and more, then it raises the volume on how it gets your attention. And so then maybe a minor back pain becomes a chronic back pain. Maybe a headache once a month becomes, migraines every day for 4 hours a day. Right? And so your body is this living, breathing, amazing, conscious being that is only interested in steering you in the direction of your dreams. It's only interested in making your life better. It is not interested in making your life worse. So when it breaks down, it's because there's a breakdown in the communication between you and your body. And so what do? We start to get curious. We start to ask questions, right? And I cannot tell you the number of people that come to me with the diagnosis that they say that their doctors gave them. And my first question to them is, well, does that expand your energy when you hear the diagnosis? And they're like, no, it makes it feel heavy. I feel contracted. I get depressed. I'm upset. I'm obsessed with trying to heal this thing that I was diagnosed with. And I'm like, can I say something? I'm like, sure. I'm like, I don't think that that's the problem. The diagnosis is actually not a correct diagnosis. Do you mind if we explore your body a little bit more, be a little bit kinder to it, not try and throw a label at it at what we think is wrong with it, and see what we can do to maybe open up the channels so that the energy can move, so that something can shift. And 9 times out of 10, something shifts. When it doesn't shift long term, it's because the person with the chronic disease keeps labeling it as the disease, right? And yeah, like if you're in a relationship and the person keeps saying to you, you're angry, you're angry, you're angry, and you're like, I'm not angry. Eventually, you're going to want to leave because you're tired of being labeled as showing up as something or someone that you're not, right? It's not a truth. And so the best way is, okay, let's get underneath the symptoms. So chronic fatigue, right, could be that you and your body are energetically split. It might be that you're not in alignment with your truth. And so this separation is creating exhaustion. When you're living a life you don't want to be living, exhaustion, right? And yes, Western medicine is amazing. I am totally grateful for Western medicine. I broke my wrist a couple years ago. I had to get, um, you know, a plate and 8 screws in my body. And I'm so grateful that there was Western medicine. And so, the story of my wrist is I was in this toxic relationship. I was trying to make it work. He was an alcoholic and an addict who kept claiming that he had been, before we met, he was sober for 5 years. So his mom was diagnosed with cancer, died 4 months later. I figured that he was just going through a hard time, needed to vent, it would change. Well, it never did because he really, truthfully, was living a lie. And I was also living a lie because I was making excuses for him. And so in this process, the day I kicked him out of my house and I was like, no longer, nope, no longer. And that day, I'm a single mom. It was a Saturday. My son, we wanted to go snowboarding and I was like, all right, let's go. I don't feel great. I kind of didn't want to go. Just wanted to stay in the house. I wanted to let myself sort of grieve and heal and cry and watch cheesy movies and hang out with my son. I didn't want to go snowboarding, but my son was like, Mom, let's go. Let's go. Okay, let's go. And in fact, I actually think he was okay with staying at home, but I'm almost like, no, I better do this so I'm not a bad mom. And we went snowboarding. I ignored all the signs on the way to the mountain. I forced us to go to a mountain I didn't want to go to. We have 4 mountains in Aspen, so quite lucky to live here. And, as I'm going up the mountain to get to the chairlift, I parked in a place we never park. We went to a chairlift we never get on. Like all these things that I did to ignore my awareness. And sure enough, on my very first run coming down the mountain, I ended up hitting a patch of ice, doing turning my head around to see someone behind me, and ended up snapping my wrist and breaking my bone. And it's like, wow, what was the universe telling me? My right wrist, I'm a healer. I use my hands for everything. I build, part of my business is online. I do a lot of online coaching and stuff, and I needed my hands and to be so humble that I couldn't even open a bottle of water. I couldn't open a kombucha. I couldn't cook. It was hard to go to the bathroom. I mean, it was the most humbling experience. And yet it woke me up because I knew very, very early on this relationship was not meant for me. And as I'm talking, I'm sweating, right? Our body gives off heat when it is dissipating energies we've been holding on to. Right? When we get cold, it's because our body's healing something, right? So you dissipate it. Once it's dissipated, if you're going to elevate your vibration, one of the ways to elevate your vibration is your body gets really cold and shaky and freezing. And so if you are in a process of healing, you might go through a lot of hot and cold. Well, guess what menopause is? It is not a problem, although we label it as a problem, and I've experienced it as a problem by labeling it as a problem. Menopause is simply a woman's sort of rite of passage to evolve into someone and something even greater. with greater sense of intuition, with kinder, softer, more open, more resonant, right? But when we get cold, it's because we're literally elevating, right? Vortexing into a new energetic shift. And so, my friends, if you've been listening to this and you have been dealing with a symptom like weight, trying to lose weight, it's a symptom. The diet is not the solution to the symptom. The solution is to get underneath the surface and figure out where you don't feel safe, is to get underneath the surface and figure out where you feel insecure, is to get underneath the surface and figure out where you don't feel enough, and then go through a process of trying to heal it. My recommendation is find someone that you resonate with. You can journal about it. It's usually helpful, and I do this myself. I see people who help me with my blind spots, because our blind spots are usually, we can't cognitively get ourselves out of our blind spots. And most of our blind spots are traumas that happened to us between the ages of 0 to 3 when we were pre-verbal or nonverbal. And yes, you might be able to say hi or daddy or mommy from the age of 2 to 3, but you don't have the complex vocabulary for the traumas that may have occurred. And so trying to use your verbal words to heal a symptom, right, doesn't always work because you're trying to use your logical brain. Well, when the trauma happened, it wasn't logical. So Einstein says you can't heal in the same way. You can't solve a problem in the same way you created it. And so if you went through some massive trauma, you cannot use your cognitive brain to try to solve it. You cannot go on 100 different diets, which I've tried, I've done, it doesn't work, right? To change a body that didn't need changing. What needed changing was I needed to address, something, a trauma that happened in my family life at 17, where I didn't feel safe. I left my house. When I moved back in, I gained 20 pounds. And then I struggled with my body image and weight from that moment forward, until I got to the root of the moment I stopped feeling safe. Then I was able to heal. And so you never know what is lurking underneath your symptom. My invitation to you, if this resonates with you, is, if you want to book a session, book a session. I am here. But my invitation to you is stop trying to label the thing you think you have. And instead, start getting curious and asking your body questions. My favorite way to do that: close my eyes, put my hands on the body part that's bugging me, right? And then just say, okay, what are you trying to communicate? Whew. All right. I got an energy. It wasn't words. It wasn't a sound. It was kind of like grayish. And then I closed my eyes again. Okay, what else are you trying to communicate? And it's just this, and this is actually right here today on me. I've had a lot of clients, and sometimes when I'm healing clients or helping clients, my body will go through things. And then I know, it's not really mine, but how do I get rid of it? I'm just going to give it some energy. I'm going to look at the molecule so the molecule changes. And so, my friends, start looking at the molecules of your body, of your symptoms. Stop diagnosing them and start getting really curious about how you can change it. I also teach an intuitive energy course. We're in the middle of it now, but we will open the doors again soon. So if you're curious, if you would like to sort of discover how you can become the best energy worker or best coach or best consultant or best therapist or best massage therapist for your clients, I teach a pretty phenomenal intuitive energy course that teaches you how to be aware. It teaches you how you read energy. It teaches you how you pay attention, and it teaches you how to trust your gut and trust your intuition to make the changes necessary that allow your clients to once and for all begin to feel free. Right. And just like any relationship, your relationship with your body is an ever evolving, expanding one. So you don't just like try something once and then you're like, oh, I'm done. Right. If you were to get married and never work on your marriage, chances are it would end in divorce. Body's the same way. You have this literally lifetime relationship with your body. So you have to constantly be engaged in the relationship, willing to communicate. If your body has a symptom, ask what it's trying to communicate. Don't go to the doctor trying to label. Now, we do need doctors, right? They are helpful. They are beneficial. But the point is that a lot of times there's hidden things underneath the surface that you don't even know you've been hiding. You've got that blind spot. So my invitation to you is start getting curious about what's going on in your life. Start getting curious about where you cut off your awareness. Start getting curious where you stopped going after your dreams. And you'd be surprised what you find when you start looking. So if this show today resonated with you, please share it. Please comment, send us an email, tell us what inspired you. And if you'd like to book a session with me, check out my website. And until next time, we'll see you on the flip side. Thanks for being here.
Katherine is not a medical practitioner nor a licensed therapist. She has strong opinions and will express them, and truly believes that you are your best advocate for any and every area of your life. If you need medical advice, please consult your physician.